Hi, and welcome to another one of our Change Insight videos. Today, I'm here at the BPAY office in Sydney. In 2017, the BPAY Group was created to incorporate multiple businesses, along with new values to describe the people, the organisation, and the culture. These values included innovation, embracing new ideas, providing people with the opportunity to make the most of their skills. BPAY is a financial services organisation that allow you to pay your bills easily and simply online. Recently, BPAY launched their OSCO product. OSCO allows you to pay and receive payments in under a minute. So say, for example, you're out with your friends, you go to a restaurant, and the restaurant owner does not do split bills. You're usually the great person who offers to pay on behalf of everyone. And then you spend the next weeks and sometimes months chasing up these payments. Well, the team here at BPAY have creatively come up with a way where you can provide your friends with your details and you'll have payments in your accounts in under a minute. Now, behind creative ideas like this comes a team of very hardworking individuals. And when I speak to these individuals, there is always one common denominator that comes up: John. John Banfield is the CEO here at BPAY. John has an extensive background in strategic leadership in the payment and financial services sectors that spans over 30 years. Prior to starting at BPAY, John had senior, vice president, as well as general manager roles at both American Express and Transaction Network Services. John was appointed CEO here at BPAY in November 2014, where he was responsible for determining the key strategic objectives for the business. Now, included enhancing and innovating BPAY, and he's done exactly that. Today, we're going to be chatting with John to ask some more specific questions on how he was able to successfully take their organisation through this major cultural transformation, which has led to BPAY winning the Aon Hewitt Best Employer Award. Let's go and have a chat with John. Today we're here with John Banfield, CEO of BPAY. And we'd like to ask John some questions about how him and the team here at BPAY were able to transform the culture into the amazing culture that it is today. How are you, John?
I'm well, thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So, John, in our series of Change Insights, we've already looked at resistance to change, how to overcome this resistance, and now we're looking at how to engage people onto the change journey. So, I'd like to know a little bit more about the incremental steps that you and the team here took to bring everyone on board change. But before we start that, I'd like to get a little bit more personal so that our viewers can get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
Okay, so I know you've had some significant changes, and we were just chatting about that, about coming from New Zealand to here. Can you tell me a little bit about that, how that impacted you, and how has that taught you to deal with change?
Well, I think change is amongst us every single day. So you either have to live with it, go with it, or in fact kind of shelter yourself away from it. That's very hard to do. When I was 23, I actually owned my own home in Christchurch, New Zealand, but I lived at home. So it just probably demonstrated that I wasn't too attuned to change until I was given the opportunity of moving with my current employer from Christchurch to Auckland. And that created significant change. I had to live on my own. I had to learn how to iron shirts. I had to cook. And all of those things were done by my lovely mother. And so that was the first significant change that I went through. Yeah. I've had a lot of change in my life, and change I've just got so used to. And in fact, I get excited by change because it's where you learn. And you learn about yourself, but you also learn about others, and you learn about how to handle certain situations in I think, a far better way.
Definitely agree. Now, when it comes to change, I mean, you've had a few changes in your career that has led you to become CEO here at BPAY. Often what we see is when organizations kind of face some challenges, such as, some employees say that they either work in silos or, the bureaucracy kind of stifles innovation, or they're not pushed to challenge the status quo. Now, what sort of barriers or challenges did you see here at BPAY when you first started out?
Well, I'm not sure that they were barriers. I just saw them as opportunities. A new fresh face coming in, it was a perfect opportunity to look beyond what had successfully been created over 20 years, well, not 20 years then, but 17 years then. So I came in and the board gave me license to be able to try and think about innovation, but also put the first overlay service onto the real-time payments platform here in Australia. So it was all about having really a clean slate, really looking deeply on the things that BPAY successfully did over many, many years, and then looked to what potentially we could create as opportunities for the future. So we started with a strategy, and we started with a strategy that involved a number of our employees. We got some help to do that, and we've been really looking to adapt and pivot on that strategy as we continue to work on it. And that strategy has now been in place for nearly 3 years, and we made some additions to that strategy in February of this year, and we've been living and breathing it, and it's been really successful for us.
Excellent. A lot of leaders like yourself have great strategic vision. The hard part, and which is what we found in our research, is that while some leaders talk a big vision, it's not until you actually see some incremental steps taken by leaders. So, for example, one of the strategies that we found in our research is role modeling by leadership. Now, it's interesting because from my own personal observations, and whenever I speak to some of your employees, what really comes out is actually more so those incremental steps. So if I can share one story that I heard, that when you implemented the open plan structure in the office, you didn't opt for the corner office with a view. You opted to sit with everybody else in the open plan structure.
Yeah, I did.
Now, I heard that you had a little bit of trouble with people not wanting to sit next to you. That one time, I think you offered to pay someone to sit next to you. Is that correct?
Well, look, if we go back, so we were out at Rhodes. Rhodes was great at the time, but we wanted to implement change at BPAY. And one way of being able to start that change process was, in fact, to get closer to our customers, to leverage technology in a far more effective way, to think about talent and attracting talent into our organisation, but also to work differently. And at Rhodes, I was in an office and I felt like I was in a fish tank, and I hated it. So what better way than to demonstrate that some form of activity-based working and giving employees options all over the place in terms of what work they're doing on a particular day, then they've got choice about where they do those activities. So to get to your specific point, I made a bit of a joke out of the fact that I was also going to be working out, with everyone else, and there was only one rule, and that if you accidentally sat next to me, you couldn't move for the entire day. And then because I got in so early in the morning, people knew where I was sitting. They didn't sit next to me, so I offered to give people pay increases, jokingly, to sit next to me. And I think that's kind of leveled things out. It hasn't happened to give pay increases for sitting next to me. But what it has done is it's just generally it's got to a position where people are comfortable actually sitting next to me. They don't mind.
Yeah.
Well, they realise that I'm not there most of the time anyway, so
It works out well. And another thing also that I read is that you have a no phone policy in meetings.
Not a no phone policy, but more I insist on being present. So, and what that means is that a phone shouldn't be a distraction. Your technology shouldn't be a distraction. The best thing I think a leader can do is to give their full attention to you, to others in the room. And that just then has a knock-on impact, a positive knock-on impact to the rest of the organisation. If I'm present, everyone else is present, and you get things done far more efficiently. So it's not no phones, it's just presence.
Be present.
Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting because when you talk about leadership as a way of bringing in culture, when they speak of the statistic that 70% of change initiatives fail, one of the biggest barriers is leadership engagement. And now there are often other barriers. So our research is showing barriers such as lack of communication or unclear communication, as well as lack of clarity around the change process, individual resistance to change, among a lot of other barriers. What have you seen as specific? And I know you said it's not barriers, they're opportunities, but I mean, when you're actually implementing change there and then, have you seen some specific barriers that, not particularly with people or in a certain situation, but generally, is there something that you've seen that is constant barrier when it comes to implementing change in an organisation?
I think that there is always different levels of resistance that you will get when making change. Some people are on board straight away, and some people will take time before they hop on board. And a classic example are our company values. So we had values that, there were 6 values that were words, like trustworthy and efficiency. So they were meaningless. They really had no real gravitas. They weren't motivational or inspiring. And we created values, and we started that process with our employees. And we started that process by asking them, what do they love about the company they work for today? What elements do they really enjoy? And what do they want for the future? And that really gave us a platform for being able to work on then a change of the value set. And we created values through our employee base, and we created them from the ground up rather than from management forcing them down. And you then bring people on that journey. And a lot of the people that were probably slower to come were those that were involved also, and therefore had a say in creating these fantastic values. So I think that in itself is a way of being able to overcome the barriers, and I think we successfully did that.
We speak about that as an all-in approach to change. So often you see either a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach, but this is an all-in approach where the people that it's not necessarily just strategic direction, is that accompanied with engagement from the bottom up, and then everyone getting involved in the actual change so that they feel some type of ownership and accountability because they were involved in the process. So it's really refreshing to see that actually happening and then succeeding.
It works.
It definitely works, definitely. Now, leading on to how happy the employees here are, you have recently won the Aon Hewitt Best Employer Award.
Yes.
Now, some of the commonalities among winners of this award are things like sales growth that's 6% higher than other counterparts, and a employee rate that's 33% lower, and also an engaged leadership force as well. What would you say is the most proud measure for you when you won that award?
Very tough to put it down to one specific measure. Coming into the organisation, we went to 84% this year. So I'm not sure that there is any one particular measure other than the entire result. However, if I had to choose, then I would just say the way in which leader engagement and manager effectiveness is resulted as a really positive score is exceptionally pleasing, because if you have your employees measuring the effectiveness of their leaders or their managers, that just sings the right story across the organisation, that we're collaborating, communicating, and certainly getting on with business in the most effective way, and leaders are leading effectively, managers are managing effectively, and our employees are loving that two-way process that works very effectively.
Yeah. When you say managers that are managing effectively, what would you say is a way to measure that, for example?
Well, it really comes back to feedback. And that feedback, we have a 360-degree feedback process, and one piece of feedback that we got a couple of years ago now was really about having the tougher discussions, and really, people wanting to understand, where they stood, or the conversation at the halfway stage of the year didn't marry with where someone ended up at the end of year score. So when you think about that, then there's not a good constructive conversation that's had timely throughout the year, and we wanted to make sure that was happening. So we did a significant amount of training. And what we did realise, Lydia, is that we realised that we've put managers into roles without the training to be able to, where they've actually led people before. And if that's the case, you're setting them up for failure unless you're helping them. And we helped a lot of leaders to be able to be trained and coached and mentored around that process of being able to help their employees, and their employees to help their leaders who haven't been a leader before, to have those good constructive discussions.
It's really interesting, that point, because often what happens is middle management get a little bit lost in the middle, don't they? So you get the senior leaders who know the strategic vision and they push that towards the middle management, and then you get sometimes that resistance from employees towards the middle management, and middle management kind of gets stuck in this rut. And what we found in a really interesting article that we came across recently is why change needs to change. So a really interesting point is that middle management, because you often have the middle management kind of stuck where they get the strategic vision from senior leaders, but they also get resistance from employees, and they just get confused or get overwhelmed, or so by building those capabilities within middle management, what you're really doing is equipping them. Now, there was this article by Roy Ashkenas, and he co-authored the Boundaryless Organization. And what he said is that whilst change management methodologies is sound, what often happens is that middle management are not equipped to take people through change. And that's why we're kind of at the Change Hub, we're focusing a lot about building that capabilities in middle management. So when we do that, and let us know what you think in terms of what is actually effective. I mean, people go to training all the time. What have you found, instead of a Band-Aid solution to things, let's just use training as a Band-Aid solution, how could you get that inside approach to really allow your middle management to be equipped with dealing with senior leadership vision, but also taking people through that change? What would you say is a crucial aspect to really get effective capability building in middle management?
Yeah, it's a great question, of which I'm not sure I have a satisfactory answer, because I keep going back to the Band-Aid solution, and the only way in which you remember training is when you rip that Band-Aid off really quickly because it's really sore, and it just stays with you. Some of the most effective training that I've done have been role plays, and being able to put yourself in a situation, have someone else critique that role play, for you to be able to take that recording away and watch it later and understand, and also I think really importantly, record the feedback you get, because then that gives you a 360-degree view of how that process has worked, and just keep referring back to it, and then it just comes down to practice, and there are certain elements of training that you'll take away where you'll get some really good advice, and I just think just stick to that and practice it, and then ask for feedback sometimes. Hey, how did I go? Have you seen any change? And these are questions to your leader, but also to your employees. Or your employees may even come to you to say, you know what, I've really noticed a change, and I'm really grateful that you went through this process, because this is now what I see. So if you start to have that conversation with your employees, I'm sure they'll be more comfortable having the same conversation back with you.
Yeah. And now, when you say, for example, we get lots of leaders saying we want to do a culture change, but they often think it's like a quick thing. Let's just do it. How long would you say it took, BPAY, for you to really see some fundamental changes? Again, not Band-Aid things, but more inside-out changes.
We're still on the journey, so it's not a quick fix. We had a number of things in our favour to help us. So moving office helped us, because we set up an environment that was the first phase in that change process. Changing our values, changing the way in which we work, changing in terms of the way in which we use technology, our behaviours. So we established new behaviours and how we wanted people to behave in the way in which we wanted them to go and achieve their goals were all linked to our values. And then we also we elicited feedback along the way to ensure that we continue that momentum. So it probably has been nearly 2 years. And as I say, we're still on the journey, and it's a really exciting one. The way in which we now think about going from what I would call a clan culture, and I've described this before, a clan culture is more of a family sort of culture where leaders are seen as parents. We've moved away from that now to adhocracy, where adhocracy is about innovation and entrepreneurial spirit, as well as having elements of that clan culture where leaders are seen as coaches and mentors rather than as parents. Yeah. So we've moved quite significantly. It's not a flick of the switch. It's been a gradual process, and everyone has come on the journey, which has been a really exciting change for us. And I call it a journey because it's a never-ending journey. It's not as if you're getting to an end point. I think we'll just keep evolving over time.
And it's interesting, every single thing that you have mentioned, you have actually told us a little bit of a story or some insight on how you did that, practically speaking. So for example, when you said, the values, well, it's by actually incorporating people's feedback on the values. If you said about, leadership, it's about role modeling as a leader. So everything is attached to some practical strategies to actually take to get there. It's not just, blurting out this vision for everyone and expecting everyone to just, accept. Now, if you had 3 pieces of advice for leaders who would like to embark on a cultural change, what would you say are the 3 key things?
Well, the first would be involve your employees. So elicit feedback on what they love today and what they look forward to tomorrow. Yeah. I would also say seek some help. So we enlisted some help, not only from our agency in terms of helping us go through the process to develop values, but we also had a specific helper around the change agent process. And they were really quite interesting because they weren't, deep diving in. They kind of sat to one side and they gave us some advice on how to handle things and how to move forward. And it was our employees, our people, that were actually going through that change process. But they had, an ear and some advice along the way. So I think that would be number 2. And number 3, I then think it comes down to leadership, and it really comes down to owning it and really being proud and motivated around the change, and really talking it up, but also living it. So I talk about this acronym of MAD, M-A-D, and it's not specifically around getting mad and getting angry. It's about making a difference.
Yeah.
And I talk about it with my twin boys. We're running onto the rugby field. You just go out there and make a difference for your team. And if every employee can make their little difference in the organisation, man, we'll have a powerful organisation.
So those 3, I don't think anyone has described them that well. That's very good. In terms of the change agent, we call them change facilitators. So where a change facilitator will come in and they're not doing the change, they're facilitating it, but also equipping people along that change journey and making them capable of doing the change. So a lot of constant debates around, do we hire a consultant or do we empower our team to do it themselves? This is kind of this perfect middle ground where you're doing both. That way you're not bombarding your employees with this huge change, but you're also giving them capabilities to feel like they are part of it and they own it. So I think that's a really unique point of view, and it's great for leaders to think, I don't actually have to do it all myself.
Totally.
You can still bring expertise, but also build that expertise within in-house as well. So really it's about engaging your employees, bringing in a change agent or a facilitator to empower everyone, build capabilities, as well as having leadership in line, accountable, and owning the change along with the team. Now, John, before we wrap up, I know you're a Freakonomics radio fan. Now, my favorite episode is how creativity comes about. What's your favorite episode?
Oh, you know what? I just enjoy listening to other CEOs. It's a pretty lonely job.
I've heard that a lot, actually.
And being able to listen to other CEOs and what they've done within their business, what they maybe do personally, but also just how they interact, how they lead their business. I think I'm always intrigued by that. Yeah. So I forget the specific episode, but there was one on the CEO of Pepsi. I forget the lady's name now, but it's all inspiring in terms of big company, obviously, but listening to the way in which she is running that company, what's important to her, and you just get really good, I think, tidbits for how in fact you think about your own role.
Is it Anya Nuri?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it is.
Yes, I've heard that one, and she's very inspiring. How she, I heard that in that episode, it's something crazy like she'll do her reading between 12 to 4 a.m. or something crazy like that, and she survives on minimal hours of sleep, and that's it's always inspiring.
She survives on Pepsi with sugar.
That's right. Well, part of her whole transformation is bringing in a healthier version. So, and finally, now as a CEO, you must have constant things running through your mind. How do you just switch off and spend that quality time with family and with your twin boys, and really just detach? Can you detach? Is that possible even?
It is a little easier because I'm a bit of a routine person. So I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I go to the gym and I do my exercise in the gym. I'm in at work at about 7:30, and so I don't see the family in the morning, but I am religious about leaving work around 5:45 to get home and have dinner with the family. And one of the things that we do as a family is we talk about best things that day. So it's all about the positives rather than, people going home and whinging about what happened at work or at school or somewhere else. So I like the glass half full, and what did you learn at school? What was the best thing today? So I think that helps me to chill out, relax, and the other thing that helps me is I love playing golf on Saturdays.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, and I'm not a parent that gets all upset on the sideline watching kids rugby or water polo. I seem to chill out and zone out and just really enjoy the kids' sport.
Yeah, excellent. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're
We've
welcome.
learnt so much from how you and the team at BPAY have been able to transform the culture here, and there are so many takeaways for leaders who want to go down that route, that it's doable, but it takes a while, and it takes persistence, it takes role modeling, and it takes consistency in what you are doing, and really having focus on that vision. Thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on another one of our episodes into Change Insights and how to engage people onto the change journey. This is Lydia Musa, founder of the Change Hub, where we specialise in facilitating change that sticks.